Well, good afternoon, fellow constitutionalists, and welcome to the Wednesday edition. Man, I am so messed up today. Everything was going wrong here on the show. Welcome to the Wednesday edition of the Dan Clement Show, a Christian political talk show. I'm your host, Dan Clement, your constitutional warrior, fighting for your right just to be an American. It is September 20th in the year of our Lord 2017. Remember, we're a hyphen-free, PC-free zone. God has stolen control. He does love you. And I'm broadcasting live from the Hemlock Studios here in the beautiful central Susquehanna Valley in the great Keystone State. I do not have Blog Talk Radio up. If you're in the chat room at YouTube, I do not have Blog Talk Radio pulled up because my main computer, 4 times now, while I've been trying to get the show going here, has restarted itself, and I don't know why. I'm going to have to go in after the show and scrub it with malware and make sure everything's set up on it and all that kind of funky stuff, and it just, folks, it just makes me mad when something like this happens. So I'm actually just broadcasting off my other 2 computers, my actual production computer and of course my streaming computer is still going strong here also. So that's where I'm broadcasting off of. I didn't get everything done that I wanted to get done because of this dumb computer. My main computer was recycling on me, as it were. So I'm going to get in there and clean that out today and have to work on that. I was going to work on some other stuff around the house, but I need to get that going also. So if you notice too, my picture may be a little bit off, not too much in the as far as the camera goes. While I was working on the desk, I bumped everything just a hair bit and sort of threw it out of whack, as it were. So hopefully we'll get everything to look good now. I'm trying to just make sure everything's looking good right now. I am not going to be able to. I'm afraid to open up my, excuse me, I'm afraid to open up my Firefox browser on my main computer because I'm wondering if that's what happened to it. I did have a program real quick to let you IT geeks out there know, some type of cleaner program, a CC cleaner, and I come to find out that there was some malicious malware in it that my, that my AVG, my antivirus, was not picking up, and so I got rid of that. I tried to clean the computer after that. I don't know if I got it all out. I don't think I did, because it was actually something that was going to that was causing issues with other people's computer, and I wonder if I infected my main computer trying to keep it going. So I am going to get back over. I'm on my main computer using my Brave browser. I'm hoping I can get back in there and look and see, get into my live control room over here. And, okay, everything's working good over there. I want to pop my, Dave is in the chat room, and I appreciate that. Let me do a couple things here. Let me downsize. Let me get this downsized. I'm slowly getting things up. Like I said, I apologize, Dave. I did not realize that my main computer was going to do this garbage to me. And I'm trying to get everything back up on my main computer so I can actually do the show. And I do it. Like I said, sometimes this happens with computers. It really does. And I'm not making excuses. I want to be more professional in this, but like I said, life happens sometimes, and it just amazes me how, okay. Like I said, it's got everything working badly. I do apologize. I do see in the live chat over there, Dave. So hopefully you can hear me. If you let me know if things are working out okay that way. With you, this will be an abbreviated show because I already see that I'm already almost 20 minutes into it, and I'm only scheduled for 20 minutes on Blog Talk Radio, which I do not have up. So I'm hoping that folks will realize that maybe I don't have that up, and I'm not even going to try to bring it up or at least not in this particular moment. I don't even know if I can get the chat room to come up without crashing anything. So I'm going to try to at least get on the chat room, let people know that I'm over on YouTube. All right, folks, today, like I said, I do apologize. I didn't get everything done I wanted to do today because I was video editing. I'm still learning the ins and out of my, it's called Shotcut video editor. And I learned some new tricks today, which, you know, I'm happy about, which is helping me actually get more clips onto the show. And I'm just gonna, let me get over here a minute. Okay, I'm not gonna even try to get on the Blog Talk Radio as far as the studio goes, getting in there. I'm just going to get on the chat and tell folks that I'm actually just over on YouTube today due to a glitch, if I can even get in there on this. I haven't done this in a while on Brave. And Brave browser, it's called, it blocks ads, it blocks cookies, it allows you to browse anonymously on the web so they can't track you. I use DuckDuckGo as my web browser because of all the tracking that Google and Yahoo and all these other browsers, Bing, whatever main browser you use, Firefox or Mozilla Firefox browser, they all have these cookies in there that they literally sell to these companies saying, hey, this person browsed this, let's put some more ads on this particular person's browser because of their browser history. I don't want that. I really don't want that. You know, if I want something, I will go look it up. Most of the time when I'm browsing something, I'm interested to see what it is because someone else shared it with me. I'll go look and it's, you know, well, okay, if I'm interested, I'll bookmark it. If not, I don't. I don't need ads being pushed in my face all the time. And I understand that companies, IT companies, Google, Mozilla, all these folks make money off of these things. And I understand that. But I also have, I think, a right as an American not to participate in that. And so that's, I see that I'm not going to get into Blog Talk Radio to let people know that I'm over here. So hopefully everything will still keep running for YouTube here, and I do apologize to everybody that was trying to get on earlier. Dave said he went over to look at the end of my video yesterday, see if I said I wasn't going to be here. And like I said, I usually am ready 20 minutes ahead of time. Today is about 20 minutes ahead of time where I started making sure everything was set up. I had my show notes page done and everything. And then I went to shut my Firefox browser off. Then I restarted it and got back into Blog Talk Radio and YouTube. And as soon as I went to the live control room for YouTube, it went bye-byes. I mean, it went totally bye-byes. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I mean, you just literally have to be kidding me that this actually was going on. And it was unbelievable. I'm panicking. It did it 4 or 5 more times, and it just right now, it's stable right now, but I didn't open up Firefox. So I'm wondering if it wasn't something to do with Firefox. So I have to investigate that. I do apologize. Today, I have some clips from President Trump's UN speech. Like I said, today's show is going to be kind of abbreviated because of the time. I'm going to still try to do an hour on YouTube, and that way I get an hour that I can put over on Blog Talk Radio and that. But I titled the show today, When Socialism is Implemented Perfectly. And you might think that that's a weird title for a show, that, well, how can you implement socialism perfectly? Well, all I have to do is go look at Venezuela. President Trump in his UN speech pointed this out. And I've never really thought about it in these terms before, and I'm glad President Trump brought this out because it got me thinking about it. I have an article, I'm going to have an article, I don't have the link on my show notes page yet, but it's from Mises.org, and it was posted in May 4th of this year, 2017. Venezuela before Chavez, a prelude to socialist failure. And you'll be fascinated about that. I'm going to get into that, one of the first things. after I talk about the clips. We have President Trump talking about Kim the Rocket Man. I couldn't get it out. Kim Jong-un, the Rocket Man. And the mainstream media is just going ballistic over that. But to be realistic, it seems like every other day we're talking about how he's launching a missile here, he's doing this here with another missile. This guy is obsessed with rockets. So I think that's a good description, as it were, of Kim Jong-un, of being the Rocket Man. Then he also talks about Venezuela and his comments about Venezuela and other socialist regimes in the past and what's happened in Venezuela today. There are there's another video clip I want to show you. Maduro to Trump, get your dirty hands off of Venezuela. And it's talking about the supporters of Maduro and how Maduro is doing nothing wrong and all that kind of stuff. So we talked about socialism in the past, but again, I just want to reemphasize that President Trump, I think, perfectly illustrated socialism when it's implemented. And again, I never thought about it this way. Maybe other people have. I don't know, but I've never thought about it this way, that in Venezuela, socialism has been implemented perfectly and is destroying the country. And the mainstream media, the Democrats, especially social Democrats like Bernie Sanders, can't see that. Maduro definitely can't see that because he's living in his ivory palace. The socialism doesn't affect him. I bet you he still has toilet paper. I bet you he's not eating rabbits, cats, and dogs to sustain his life. Matter of fact, he looks kind of plump and healthy. So and this is the point in socialism, none of these ills of socialism really affect the leaders in the socialist movement. They never have and never will. And if you think about totalitarian regimes, the totalitarianism never really affects the tyrants, the dictators. It only affects the people that they try to control. And so this is very, very important to understand. And I know there's a lot of folks on Facebook that are taking President Trump's Rocket Man. I love it. It's an old Elton John song, Rocket Man. But his comments are just spot on. Now, there's a lot of people out there who think that's not very presidential to call another leader of a country a Rocket Man. Well, if the shoe fits, wear it. You know, little Kimmy, he is totally infatuated with rockets and getting missile technology. And this is, and I didn't have time to get this because this is one of the last things I was going to get, but on yesterday in the news cycles, North Korea and little Kimmy are holding the world, especially the United States, at gunpoint as far as trying to blackmail us. Saying, you know what, we'll stop this if you give us some money. This was reported yesterday. And I'll try to find that real quick while I'm playing some other video clips here so I can show it to you during the show here. And it just, like I said, it's for this reason, and not this only reason, but this is one of the reasons why, even though I don't support President Trump, I didn't vote for him or anything, that you got to love the audacity of this man. To go out there in the UN and say what he said in his speech yesterday, or the day before, whenever he did it. Was it Monday he did that? For him to go out, I think it was Monday, for him to go out and say what he said at the UN is priceless. It is absolutely priceless. Because he's not talking like a PC, fork tongue, talk out of both sides of your mouth politician. He's talking like Donald Trump has always talked. He tries to be a straight shooter. I don't think he accomplishes it all the time, but he does try to be a straight shooter. Thanks, Dave. Dave went over and left a message over at BTR to let everybody know what's happening. I appreciate that, Dave, because I can't even get over there on the chat room with my Brave browser. So, anyway, let me get over here. Oh my, I just, folks, the weekend's coming up. You might have something to do. Normally I do this yesterday, but I forgot to do it yesterday. If you're the guy or the gal in your house that takes care of the honey-do list, and you need parts for something, to fix something, whether it be a piece of power equipment or an appliance in the house that you need to get up and running, and you don't have the time to go look locally for the parts because you live such a busy life, but you can get your camera behind her and take a picture of the plaque on it to give you the serial number, the model number, the name, and all that. Go to the DanColumbusShow.com and click on the Sears Part Direct widget. Enter that information in the part you're finding. You'll find that part at a good price. You probably at a better price you can locally. Plus, if you use the widget over at the DanColumbusShow.com, there's an offer code there that you can put in and get 10% off your parts. It's fantastic. If you need your part in a couple days, they have express shipping. It costs a little bit more, but you get the part when you need it, get the equipment fixed when you need it, whether it's power equipment or an appliance, and get it back up and running so you can continue on doing other things on your honey-do list. So if you like what you hear on the Dan Columbus Show and you want to support the show, Sears Part Direct is an affiliate marketing partner of mine. And by going through the widget, you'll help support the show, no extra cost to you, and you actually save $10 off of your purchase, which is a fantastic thing. All right, today's daily Bible reading comes from the book of Jeremiah, chapter 1, verses 4 through 10. Then the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I sanctified you. I ordained you a prophet to the nations. Then I said, O Lord God, behold, I cannot speak, for I'm a youth. But the Lord said to me, Do not say I'm a youth, for you shall go to all to whom I send you, and whatever I command you, you shall speak. Do not be afraid of their faces, for I am with you to deliver you, says the Lord. Then the Lord put forth his hand and touched my mouth, and the Lord said to me, Behold, I have put my words in your mouth. See, I have this day set you over the nations and over the kingdoms, to root out and to pull down, to destroy and to throw down, to build and to plant. And a couple things in this passage that really hits home with me is, one, God said, because he talked about, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Life begins at conception. Period. End of sentence, new paragraph. 2, down in verse 9, it says, Behold, I have put my words in your mouth. Now, we don't have the miraculous putting of words in our mouth today, as they did back in Jeremiah's time. We have the complete will of God. We have the complete word of God as he intended it to be for us. We have his word. We need to go read and meditate, remember, and study upon these things. And not only that, the final step is to share the good news of the gospel with the nations. Just as he said in verse 10, I have this day set you over the nations and over the kingdoms, to root out and pull down, to destroy and throw down, to build and to plant. God's word is many things to many people. And it depends on how you receive God's word, if it's going to be the type of thing that's going to root out and pull down, destroy and throw down, or build and plant. It's just that simple. Today's quote mail comes from W.T. Richardson. The mark of a saint is not perfection, but consecration. A saint is not a man or woman without faults, but a person who has given him or herself without reserve to God. Today's short Bible lesson comes from Wes McAdams over at RadicallyChristian.com, and he posted this September 20th of this year. Are we raising athletes or Christians? Good point. It's a good point that Wes makes there. Are we raising athletes or Christians? That's a good read. I went through and read that. It's a very, very good article there, and it has some very profound questions that Wes asks in there, as he always does in most all his articles. Okay. Let's see where we're going to. Okay. So you know that President Trump It was yesterday. I'm sorry. It was yesterday he addressed the United Nations. Okay? And he ticked a lot of people off in his speech. I haven't gone through all his speech to get all the clips out that I wanted. I'm still going to do some more clips because I'm using this more or less to practice my video editing, which that's one of those things you have to do to get better at it. But I have some clips that I want to talk to you about today in his UN address, and this is something that, again, I think is great. I think what he said is great. And it's one of those things that you just, I don't know. It's just one of those things that you just have to give him kudos for. Because he said exactly what needed to be said, whether you agree with him or not. He said exactly what needed to be said in the manner it needed to be said without being so PC that he's not offending anybody. Because there's some bad actors in the world, and I'm not saying the United States doesn't sometimes act as a bad actor. I'm not saying that at all. I think we need to be chastised when we are bad actors in the world. But in the same breath, in the past administration, the Obama administration, it seemed like he didn't call anybody out as a bad actor. He wanted to make friends with the playground bullies and everything. And it's like, okay, you know, I can understand that to a certain extent, but again, here we have the situation here where Trump is calling out these bad actors like North Korea. You can't say that North Korea is acting as a good neighbor to anybody in the region. None whatsoever. And his threatening the United States, threatening Japan, threatening Guam, which is part of the United States, it's a protected territory of the United States. You got to call him out on it. You absolutely have to call him out on it, and President Trump did. And this is what have the PC crowd in the United States just going ballistic, folks. I mean, these guys, and even throughout the world, these guys are going ballistic. These globalists out there, that Donald Trump is not playing the game. And folks, let me tell you something. These are serious times. These are times not to have to play games at all, whatsoever. Well, let me get into the. Let me get everything set up here. Let me get into the first video here where he talks about his comments on North Korea. And folks, these are funny. Hang on just a second.
No one has shown more contempt for other nations and for the well-being of their own people than the depraved regime in North Korea. It is responsible for the starvation deaths of millions of North Koreans and for the imprisonment, torture, killing, and oppression of countless more. We were all witness to the regime's deadly abuse when an innocent American college student, Otto Warmbier, was returned to America only to die a few days later. We saw it in the assassination of the dictator's brother using banned nerve agents in an international airport. We know it kidnapped a sweet 13-year-old Japanese girl from a beach in her own country to enslave her as a language tutor for North Korea's spies. If this is not twisted enough, now North Korea's reckless pursuit of nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles threatens the entire world with unthinkable loss of human life. It is an outrage that some nations would not only trade with such a regime, but would arm, supply, and financially support a country that imperils the world with nuclear conflict. No nation on earth has an interest in seeing this band of criminals arm itself with nuclear weapons and missiles. The United States has great strength and patience, but if it is forced to defend itself or its allies, we will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea. Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself and for his regime. The United States is ready, willing, and able, but hopefully This will not be necessary. That's what the United Nations is all about. That's what the United Nations is for. Let's see how they do.
Let's see how they do. And one of the things that you have to, and I have to readjust this a little bit. I was missing a boat with it just a little bit while I was talking to you because of the sight lines. Anyway, President Trump threatens North Korea and calls them out. Literally calls them out. And they needed to be called out. They needed to be called out. If there's a bully on the playground, before you do anything with the bully, he has to be recognized. Everybody has to see him for what he or she is, as a bully. And a lot of times, if enough people recognize that person's a bully, it takes away his or her power. Now, they still might try to impose their will on folks, but the problem with that is there's no way they can, because you just took their power away. If they're recognized as a bully, that's the first step in defeating a bully. Now, a lot of people took umbrage to his, we're going to destroy North Korea. But he didn't explain how he was going to do that. And this is where the talking heads in the mainstream media are just going, and also the Democrat Party, are just going ballistic over this comment. There's many ways to destroy an enemy without even taking military actions. You know, I remember, I don't know who said it, but I remember someone saying it years ago. Someone's really intent on committing suicide, and you try to stop them, both of you could get hurt. Both of you could get hurt. I'm not saying you shouldn't try to stop people from committing suicide. You need to talk them out of it. But there are some situations that you could yourself get hurt trying to stop somebody from committing suicide. If we just let North Korea implode in on itself, and these other countries quit trading, like China and Iran, if we stop some of these other countries from trading with North Korea, that government will implode upon itself. That government, the North Korean government, does not have an economy. It is, you want to talk about total communistic, dictatorial, tyrannical control, look to North Korea. It is a failed state. It is a failed economy. Its people literally live in fear. Most of them have been brainwashed, because they don't, the leadership, I don't care who's in charge in North Korea, they do not allow foreign news, to get into their country. If it does, it's always by accident. They don't have an open internet in North Korea. Hello, you net neutrality folks out there that want the government to take over the net, the internet, and govern it. Look to North Korea. Government big enough to give you everything is also big enough to take it away from you. So I think these remarks of Donald Trump are the right remarks for the right time. They really are. And I'm not saying if you disagree with me you're a nut or anything like that, but I'd like to have a conversation with you if you disagree with me. Because I think this is very, very important for us to understand the world we live in and what's happening in the world. Okay? So now, this is a real short video here. President Trump talks about Venezuela, and it's like I says, real short, but he hits the nail on the head.
The problem in Venezuela is not that socialism has been poorly implemented, but that socialism has been faithfully implemented. From the Soviet Union to Cuba to Venezuela, wherever true socialism or communism has been adopted, it has delivered anguish and devastation and failure. Those who preach the tenets of these discredited ideologies only contribute to the continued suffering of the people who live under these cruel systems.
All right, and he said faithfully implemented. And when you're faithful to something, you try to implement it to the best of your ability or perfectly. And we have the thing with socialism / communism. We have historical examples. We have historical examples of how these ideologies have decimated countries, have stripped the people of their freedoms and liberties that are theirs. They had these freedoms and liberties before these governments came into power. The governments took them away from them wrongly and oppressed the people. That's why, and just a little side note, that's why I have to laugh at a lot of these people out here like in Antifa and Black Lives Matter that, oh, woe is me, I'm oppressed, like Kaepernick. Oh, you know, we're an oppressed people. Huh. You don't know what oppression is. You do not know what oppression is. And folks, I am sorry. I have to say this in light of this Kaepernick comment and everything that's going on in the nation today with Antifa and Black Lives Matter, and everybody's, you know, they need to find their safe space because we are oppressed. You know, these women and stuff like that think this way. There is not a white man or white woman, not a white person, I should say, or a black person in this country that has either oppressed, I mean, I'm talking about systemically as a society, has oppressed a black person, or a black person has lived under oppression in modern times. And we are not responsible for what our ancestors did. We can recognize if they did good or bad, and we can move on from there. But the idea that people living today are oppressed like they were back under slavery, and that the white people that were committing the oppression, which, again, I got to state this, there were quite a few black folks that were slave owners too, that were oppressing black folks. We don't have that today. I'm not going around oppressing nobody. And anybody in my sphere of influence or my friendships, and I was a dispatcher, there was many races that drove for us, ethnic groups, nationalities that drove for us when I was a dispatcher, when I was a recruiter, the whole shebang. And none of them were oppressed. Matter of fact, as far as when I was driving a truck, it didn't matter what your skin color was, you made the same money as anybody else. And the only way you really got ahead in the company is through meritocracy, through your own merits. You know, you had to do good. You had to deliver your freight on time. Don't get any violations and stuff, so you could get your yearly raise, like your mileage raise. I was paid by the mile, and keep your nose clean. If you didn't do that, you didn't get your yearly raise. So it behooved you to do what was right to get your yearly raise. It was on your merits, not on your ethnicity, your skin color, your nationality, your gender, nothing, but your merits. So my life experiences, I haven't seen the oppression that these folks are talking about. Matter of fact, my dad, he may not be the smartest person in the world, but he always gave me some good piece of advice that I remember. One of them was, that I still live by this day, was that the only person holding you back from success is yourself. The only person holding you back from success is yourself. So we have these examples from his speech, talking about North Korea, talking about Venezuela, and really Venezuela is what's really on my mind more than North Korea is today, because we are literally putting in place a defense shield over their THAAD missiles that can take down anything that little Kimmy can throw up. And this administration isn't like past administrations where they're broadcasting to the lamestream media exactly everything they're doing. I would imagine, the way I've seen President Trump operate here, that there's a lot more THAAD missile batteries in place surrounding North Korea than what the lamestream media knows or other countries are willing to say, or that North Korea actually knows that are in place. That's my guess. The only reason why I'm guessing this is because of the way President Trump operates. Doesn't broadcast all this stuff to the lamestream media. Matter of fact, he has a very healthy disdain for the lamestream media and the fake news and everything else that goes along with that. The outright bias that goes with that. So again, it amazes me, the speech. I mean, I was blown away by the speech. It's only like about 49 minutes long, but it's a very entertaining speech, and there's a lot that's said in there. I'm getting some video clips off the speech talking about sovereignty and sovereign nations, and it's just, like I said, it's fantastic. It's just fantastic, the speech that he actually put forth. And so I can't emphasize that enough, though. I think this has been one of his better speeches. Did I agree with everything in the speech? No. But there was a lot of things in the speech that he put a lot of people on notice. The UN's not happy about it, especially when he talks about the sovereign people. When he talks about our Constitution, the first three words in our Constitution, we the people. Our Founding Fathers recognized the sovereignty of the people over the government. Oh, man, the globalists in the UN do not want to hear that. The petty dictators and tyrants throughout the world do not want to hear that people are sovereign over the government. They don't run their countries that way. They've never thought that way. They've always thought that there's a select elite few that can govern the people better than they can govern themselves. They can make these decisions better than the people themselves actually living day to day. And it's this ideology, and we're celebrating Constitution Week this week, it's this ideology that is bound up in the Constitution, that is bound up in the Declaration of Independence, that was bound up in the Articles of Confederation, that the people were sovereign over the state or over the government. And in America, we implemented these principles of freedom and liberty. Have we gone astray for those principles? Absolutely. From 1913 on, the anti-freedom folks in this country have done their dead level best to turn this country into something that represents and resembles Venezuela. And the failure of these folks is that they do not realize that if it wasn't for free market capitalism, they would not have the wealth to plunder, to implement their social tyranny over sovereign people. And that's exactly what socialism and communism is. It's a social tyranny over the people of a select few. And what really makes me laugh, is these folks that have this ideology, this collectivist ideology, whether you're a Democrat, anti-freedom, a social democrat, an ethical humanist, whatever, that have this collectivist idea, their thoughts are, it's better to rule with the devil or be closer to the tyrant or the dictator as possible to get their social ideas implemented. But the problem with their ideology is those, and we see this, and Stalin is the best example. Later on in his tyrannical regime, he got so paranoid that he killed a lot of people around him. Matter of fact, even when he started in his dictatorial regime in Soviet Russia, he was so paranoid that someone was going to come up and kill him or overthrow him that he either enslaved, and we don't know the exact number of people that he sent to the gulags of Siberia, but there is an estimated over 50 million people he killed or had killed under his reign of terror in Soviet Russia. And if he perceived you to be the enemy of the state, even though you might have been one of his most faithful lieutenants, guess what? You were gone. That was it. That was it for you, folks. Sayonara. That's how it works. Why would you, with all these examples in history, why would you ever even think? Why would you ever think that, well, it just wasn't implemented correctly back then? It was implemented faithfully. And I would absolutely say it was implemented perfectly. President Trump used faithfully, and I agree with him. It was implemented faithfully, and it worked exactly like how it was intended. suppress the people, enrich yourself, and allow the country to be destroyed economically, physically, the whole nine yards. We have Maduro down there that is feigning innocence. And yet, how many, and we don't even really know, but how many political dissidents has he arrested and thrown in jail? And now there's been reports over the past couple months that not only the dissident themselves, but their wives, I don't know if it's actually gotten down to the children, but at least their spouses have been in prison with them, because some of the spouses going around, see what they're doing to my husband. They imprisoned him for what? His ideas? Because he wants the people of Venezuela to be free? And so they're actually jailing the spouses of some of these political dissidents, these political prisoners of Maduro. And Maduro, again, is acting all innocent. Well, we're not doing anything wrong. You know what the people can do? They can raise rabbits and eat the meat. There's not enough rabbits in Venezuela, folks. There's not enough cats and dogs in Venezuela to stave off the starvation. So what are you going to feed the rabbits to fatten them up so you can eat them? And it amazes me. It amazes me how many Americans want that type of system. And you'll ask me and you'll say, well, Dan, what are you talking about? These Americans don't want this type of system. They absolutely do. When you talk about single health care, when you talk about you want more and more bureaucrats and bureaucracies to take control of industry, and whether you take direct control or not, if you're implementing laws and regulations, that's the same thing, folks. These socialists here in America want to split hairs. It's the same thing whether you actually own the means of production or not. And guess what? If you're controlling the means of production without owning it, guess what that's called, folks? That's called fascism. And the anti-fascists out there in the country are fighting their own people. They're fighting the wrong people if they're actually truly anti-fascists. They need to be fighting folks like Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton and Maxine Waters and Dianne Feinstein. I almost said Frankenstein. Dianne Feinstein. These anti-fascist groups out there, the Antifa is fighting the wrong people. And if we don't stop this anti-freedom activity in the United States, folks, if we don't fight it every step of the way and explain it to the folks and the good folks of America saying, do you want more freedoms and liberties, or do you want your freedoms and liberties protected? Or do you want to allow them to be taken away and everything governed by the government and a select few that think they know best how to live your lives? All we have to do is look south to Venezuela, folks. That's all the further we have to look. Now, I got one more clip here that I want to share with you. It's a Fox News take on the Trump speech. It's Brett Baer. And I'm just going to, it's like 7 minutes. I'm going to play the whole thing. I know that I might get hit for copyright infringement, but this is a news item. So we're going to go through this. Let me get this set up again. Let me get my fair use out there and get this set up.
North of here at the United Nations, President Trump threatened to, in his words, totally destroy North Korea if it continues to threaten America and its allies. He also singled out Iran, saying its biggest exports are violence, bloodshed, and chaos. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts starts us off this hour from the UN. Good evening, John.
Brett, good evening to you. President Trump came to Washington to be a disruptor, to shake things up. Today, here at the UN, he was true to form. His ambassador to the United Nations said President Trump would slap the right people in his speech. Boy, did he ever.
Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself.
On North Korea, the president left no room for interpretation or ambiguity, demanding that Kim Jong-un give up his nuclear program or else.
The United States has great strength and patience. But if it is forced to defend itself or its allies, we will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea.
The North Korean delegation, who had a front row seat, walked out before the speech, leaving only a lone note taker. And there was no reaction from the Iranian delegation as President Trump ripped Tehran for seeking to destabilize an entire region.
The Iranian government masks a corrupt dictatorship behind the false guise of a democracy. It has turned a wealthy country with a rich history and culture into an economically depleted rogue state whose chief exports are violence, bloodshed, and chaos.
The president again criticized the Obama administration for the Iran nuclear deal, insisting it is an embarrassment to the United States.
We cannot let a murderous regime continue these destabilizing activities while building dangerous missiles, and we cannot abide by an agreement if it provides cover for the eventual construction of a nuclear program.
Not surprisingly, Iran didn't like that one bit. Foreign Minister Javad Zarif tweeting, quote, Trump's ignorant hate speech belongs in medieval times, not the 21st century, unworthy of a reply. The president's address brought a sharp reaction from Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein, who said in a statement, quote, Trump's bombastic threat to destroy North Korea and his refusal to present any positive pathways forward on the many global challenges we face are severe disappointments. Israel's prime minister, on the other hand, loved it.
I've listened to countless speeches in this hall, but I can say this: none were bolder, none were more courageous and forthright than the one delivered by President Trump today. President Trump rightly called the nuclear deal with Iran, he called it an embarrassment. Well, I couldn't agree with him more.
There was sharp reaction from Venezuela's Maduro regime, which didn't like being called out for imposing a brutal dictatorship.
The problem in Venezuela is not that socialism has been poorly implemented, but that socialism has been faithfully implemented.
This return to the Cold War. For a moment, we didn't know if we were listening to President Reagan in 1982 or to President Trump in 2017.
President Trump also laid out his vision for the world, urging every nation to follow his America First policy.
As President of the United States, I will always put America first. Just like you, as the leaders of your countries, will always and should always put your countries first.
President Trump says it's not his intent to nation build or to impose democracy through military regimes, but through military action, but rather to create global stability by partnering with nations that put the well-being of their citizens first. And a note to the Venezuelan foreign minister, trying to insult the president by likening him to Ronald Reagan, not exactly an insult. Brett?
Not in the GOP. John Roberts live outside the UN. John, thanks.
I like that. I liked how the Venezuelan foreign ministers likened President Trump to Ronald Reagan. Oh, I thought we were going back to the Cold War. This is, on Venezuela's part, this is a total denial of what's happening in his country. And if he ever slips up and makes Maduro mad at him, he's going to be in the prisons just like those political dissidents. I'm sorry to say. And can I say something? I'm not a big fan of sanctions. I really am not, because I don't see where they've had that much of a positive impact on countries. Okay, because in order for sanctions to work, all the countries have to agree with it. However, as a nation, as a sovereign nation, the United States is still a sovereign nation. We can choose not to do business with Venezuela, period. And there's nothing wrong with that. All nations can do this. They have the sovereign ability to either pick and choose the nations they're going to deal with. And we refuse to deal with the Maduro regime, that socialistic / communistic regime in Venezuela. We're not going to do it. And that's our right. That is our right as a nation, not to have to deal with a state like Venezuela, a broken state like Venezuela. And Maduro has done nothing but dig his hole deeper and deeper and deeper. Again, sometimes you just got to let these countries, you give these regimes in these countries enough rope, they're going to eventually hang themselves with it. The people of Venezuela, at some point, are going to get so fed up with Maduro and what he's trying to do that Maduro, his days, folks, his days are numbered. I don't know how many days he has left, but his days are numbered. And matter of fact, we don't even have to lift a finger other than not trade with them and get as many other people to see things our way through reason and dialogue. And once the Venezuelan people see this, that it's Maduro's fault, it was Hugo Chavez's fault, it's the constituent legislature that was put in by Maduro. I've read articles that the Supreme Court has been taken over by Maduro and his sycophants, that they're not even holding up the Venezuelan Constitution anymore. And Iran the same way. You know, before the, and folks, I got to say this at the outset. I know it's going to tick a lot of people off. Our hands are not clean when it comes to the Middle East. They just are not. And especially they're not clean with Iran. If you go back and look up Operation Ajax, back in 1949, I think it was, there was a Dr. Muhammad that was democratically elected as president of Iran. And what happened in Iran was that he wanted to nationalize the oil. And nationalize it from who? British Petroleum. Now at the time, back in the 1940s, especially 1949, Britain was a totally socialistic country. They actually controlled the means of production. The BP, British Petroleum, was owned and controlled by the state. And so they had a stake in the matter, as it were, to make sure that all the money that they could from the oil fields in Iran get put into the treasuries in the United Kingdom. When Dr. Muhammad became president, he said that he was going to nationalize them, bring the oil wells back under Iranian control, and start producing the oil for themselves. And I'm not even sure, it's still cloudy, and I haven't been able to find all the research on this. I'm not even sure that they weren't going to pay back British Petroleum for the money that they invested in Iran. That would be, in my opinion, if you're a country and you wanted to take over the wells for your country, that would be the best thing to do, is pay back the companies. Say, look, we're going to nationalize these things, and the profits off of these wells, part of that's going to go to pay you back for your investment. But we're going to start using the profits for our people, for our country. And matter of fact, in the first place, just real quick, let me back this up a little further. For a country to allow another oil company to come in and just totally, and this is what happened in Venezuela. You had Exxon down there, and you had some other ones, that they owned all the means of production down there. They didn't partner with the Venezuelan oil company in a partnership, so it was a Venezuelan company that was doing most of the work, and let's say Exxon or whoever was in an advisory capacity making money just off those fees. That's not how it happened in Venezuela. That's not how it happened in Iran. They totally, like BP, totally owned front to back all the profits and everything off of it, and paid Iran a very scant royalty fee, from my understanding of the situation. But in Operation Ajax, not only the British government sided with the CIA to take out Muhammad, but then they put in the puppet regime of the Shah. The Shah of Iran was a puppet dictator that we controlled. These are verifiable facts. You can go back out through history. So while the Shah was there, the economy was doing good, but the Shah was still an evil man. The Shah was still an evil regime. There was a lot of human rights violations going underneath that were going on underneath the Shah and his secret police. But the country hasn't gotten any better. It just went from one dictator to another. And it's not, if it's democracy, then it's a perfect example of how bad democracies are. If Iran's, and a lot of people say, well, Iran's a democracy, they vote on everything. Well, then we see that democracies don't work either. So again, Venezuela is one of those countries that you just have to look at and see. And I want to go back real quick here and talk about Venezuela and see where things actually, what happened in Venezuela, as it were. He says, Venezuela before Hugo Chavez, a prelude to socialist failure. This is posted back on May 4th of this year over at Mises.org by Jose Nino. Now, this is part one of a two-part series, and there's a link to the second part. But I just want to get a little bit into this first part here, just so you know where I'm coming from. Venezuela's current economic catastrophe is well documented. Conventional narratives point to Hugo Chavez's regime as the primary architect behind Venezuela's economic tragedy, while Chavez and his successor Nicolas Maduro deserve the brunt of the blame for Venezuela's current economic calamity. The underlying flaws of Venezuela's political economy point to much more systemic problems. Observers must look beyond stage one and understand Venezuela's overall history over the past 50 years in order to get a more thorough understanding of how the country was currently fallen to such lows. Socialism before Chavez. Analysts like to point to rosier pictures of pre-Chavez Venezuela, but what these experts conveniently ignore is that the seeds of Venezuela's destructions were sowed during those glory years. Years of gradual economic intervention took what was once a country bound to join the ranks of the first world to a middle-tier developing country. This steady decline eventually created an environment where a demagogue like Chavez would completely exploit for his political gain. The once prosperous Venezuela was it was like the jewel of South America, folks. It really was. To comprehend Venezuela's long-term decline, one must look back at what made it so prosperous in the first place. Before the completion of its first oil field on April 15th, 1914, Venezuela was essentially a banana republic marked by political instability. This was largely a consequence of its colonial past and the period following its independence from Spain. Despite gaining independence from Spain, Venezuela maintained many of its primitive political and economic practices, above all, as exclusionary, mercantilist, and regulatory policies that kept it in an impoverished state. However, the discovery of oil in the early 20th century completely changed the entire ballgame. The powerful agricultural aristocracy would be supplanted by an industrial class that sought to open its oil markets to multinational exploration and foreign investment. For the first time in its history, Venezuela had a relatively liberal, free market economy and would reap countless benefits in the decades to come. From the 1910s to the 1930s, the much maligned dictator Juan Vicente Gomez helped consolidate the Venezuelan state and modernize an otherwise neo-colonial backwater by allowing market actors, domestic and foreign, to freely exploit newly discovered oil deposits. Venezuela would experience substantial economic growth and quickly establish itself as one of Latin America's most prosperous countries by the 1950s. In the 1950s, General Marcos Perez Jimenez would continue Gomez's legacy. At this juncture, Venezuela was at its peak, with a fourth-place ranking in terms of per capita GDP worldwide. While oil exploration did play a considerable role in Venezuela's meteoric ascent from the 1920s to the 1970s, this only scratches the surface in explaining how Venezuela became so prosperous during the period. A combination of a relatively free economy, an immigration system that attracted and assimilated laborers from Italy, Portugal, and Spain, and a system of strong property rights allowed Venezuela to experience unprecedented levels of economic development from the 1940s up until the 1970s. As mentioned earlier, Venezuela was at the height of its prosperity during the military dictator Marcos Perez Jimenez, while a regime like Juan Vincent Gomez regime, Perez stewardship of Venezuela was characterized by heavily political repression. Venezuela's capital structure remained largely intact during Perez's tenure, albeit with creeping degrees of state involvement. Perez did introduce some elements of crony capitalism, pharaonic public work projects, like Pharaoh's folks, and increased state involvement in strategic industries like steel industry. Nevertheless, the Perez Jimenez regime was open to foreign investment, let the price system function normally in most sectors of the economy, and did not embark on creating a prolific welfare state. The road to social democracy. Despite the prosperity brought about by Venezuela's booming economy in the 1950s, Marco Perez Jimenez, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, because I know that you pronounce the J's like H's, like Juan or Jesus, Jimenez. So that's how I'm going to pronounce it, folks. Government drew the ire of many left-leaning activists due to its heavy-handed measures. The tipping point came in 1958 when these leftist activists, working in tandem with a sympathetic military, successfully overthrew Perez Jimenez in a coup. Perez Jimenez would live the rest of his life in exile and would be a figure of derision among Venezuelan intellectual and political elites, despite the unprecedented economic and social development under his watch. Following the 1958 coup, naval officer Wolfgang Larrazabal occupied the presidency briefly until general elections were held later that year. Notable Social Democrat political leader Romulo Betancourt, yeah, that's what it is, Betancourt, would come out on top of these elections and assume the presidency from 1959 to 1964. The Fourth Republic of Venezuela, Venezuela's longest-lasting period of democratic rule, was established under Betancourt's administration. In 1961, a constitution was introduced dividing the government into three branches: executive, legislative, and judicial, and establishing an activist role for the Venezuelan state in economic affairs. This political order was further consolidated by the establishment of the Punto Fijo Pact. The Punto Fijo Pact consisted of a bipartisan agreement between two political parties, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce those other than the English, the Democratic Action and the Christian Democrats, that laid the foundation for a social democratic political order and alteration of power between the two parties. What seemed like a genuine move toward democratic stability, Venezuela's Fourth Republic marked the beginning of a process of creeping socialism that gradually whittled away the Venezuelan economy and institutional foundations. The socialist origins of Venezuela's pre-democracy advocates. Venezuela's current collapse did not happen overnight. It was part of a drawn-out process of economic and institutional decay that began decades before. When Venezuela returned to democracy in 1958, it looked like it was poised to begin an era of unprecedented prosperity and political stability. However, Venezuela's democratic experiment was doomed from the start, and one needn't look any further than the political background of its very own founder, Romulo Betancourt, to understand why its entire political system was built on a house of cards. Betancourt was an ex-communist who renounced his Marxist ways in favor of a more gradual approach to establishing socialism. Despite evolving into more of a social democrat, Betancourt still believed in a very activist role for the state in economic matters. Betancourt was part of a generation of intellectuals and student activists that aimed to fully nationalize Venezuela's petroleum sector and use petroleum rents to establish a welfare state of sorts. And folks, let me stop the reading there. Whenever a government establishes a welfare state, what they are trying to do is buy votes. It's no more complicated than that. Really, folks, if you get down to the nuts and bolts of it, they don't really care about the welfare of the people that they're trying to help. All they're caring about is, look, we give this to you, you do something for us. You know, it's like the Godfather. You know, I'm doing you a favor, you need to do me a favor sometime in the future. And that's exactly what establishing a welfare state does. Folks, the state does not care about the people. They really don't. All they care about is holding on to power and establishing their power. These political figures firmly believe that Venezuela for Venezuela to become a truly independent country and free itself from the influence of foreign interests. The government must have complete domain over the oil sector. Under this premise, a nationalized oil industry would finance cheap gasoline, free education at all levels, health care, and a wide array of other public services. This rhetoric strongly reasoned among the lower and middle, or resonated among the lower and middle classes, which would form the bulwark of Betancourt's party, Acción Democracia, voter base for the years to come. At its core, this vision of economic organization assumed that the government must manage the economy through central planning. Oil would be produced, managed, and administered by the state, while the government would try to phase out the private sector. Because, folks, and this is important to understand, if the government is going to take over a part of the private sector, it must take over all private sectors. It cannot have competition flourishing out there, because then that's just an example of someone to say, well, this is what's happening with the government-controlled sector, but look at this private-controlled sector and how well it's doing. Socialist governments cannot countenance that. They cannot allow that to happen because it makes them look bad and the private sector look good. That's why we have such an uproar in the United States, which I don't understand, why if people are explained about economics correctly, about free market economies and free market capitalism, that they would actually favor the free market capitalism over the socialism that folks like Bernie Sanders, Hillary, Obama, and most all the Democrats in the Democrat Party and the progressives and anti-freedom folks in this country would prefer. Okay? The Betancourt administration, while not an interventionist as succeeding Fourth Republic governments, capped off several worrisome policies, which include devaluation of the Venezuelan currency, the bolivar, failed land reform that encouraged squatting and undermined the property rights of landowners, the establishment of a constitutional order based on positive rights, and an active role for the Venezuelan state in economic affairs. Now, real quick constitutional lesson, since this is still Constitution Week. Our Constitution is a constitution of negative rights. What do I mean by that? Basically, our Constitution restrains the federal government in the enumerated powers, tells it exactly what it's supposed to do, and they call that a negative right, and lays out that the people still retain rights even though they're not enumerated in the Bill of Rights. You go back to the 9th Amendment like we did yesterday. And so what happens is when you have a government of positive rights, everything's a right. Everything's a right. And I remember reading something yesterday on Facebook. I thought this was great. You know, people say that health care is a right. Yeah, you have a right to pay for health care. You don't have the right to steal labor from a doctor or nurse in order to get health care. You have the right to pay for health care. You have the right to have access to health care. But also comes along, you have that right to pay for health care. I thought that was great. Betancourt's government followed up with a considerable tax hikes that saw income tax rates triple to 36%. In typical fashion, spending increases would be accompanied with these increases as the Venezuelan government started to generate fiscal deficits because of its out-of-control social programs. Where have I heard that before? Where have I heard that our growing deficits would outstrip, generate fiscal deficits because of the out-of-control government programs? Where have I heard that before? I'm trying, man. It slips my memory where I heard that before. Oh, that's right. United States government. The United States government. We are, folks. If we keep going the way we're going today without putting any brakes on socialism in America, we are going to end up like Venezuela. It may take a little bit longer, but we are going to end up like Venezuela sooner or later if we do not turn back these social democrats, these progressives, these anti-freedom folks in this country. If we don't turn them back, we're going to end up just like Venezuela. Nationalization of the oil industry. And we've seen this in my lifetime, folks, but let's go on here. While Betancourt did not achieve his end goal of nationalizing the Venezuela oil industry, his government laid the foundation for subsequent intervention in that sector. Thanks to the large oil boom in the 1970s, the government of Carlos Andres Perez capitalized on the unprecedented flow of petroleum rents brought about by the 1970s energy crisis, while oil-producing countries like Venezuela benefited handsomely from high oil prices. Bencourt's vision was finally achieved in 1975 when Carlos Andres Perez's government nationalized the petroleum sector. The nationalization of Venezuela's oil industry fundamentally altered the nature of the Venezuelan state. Venezuela morphed into a petrostate in which the concept of the consent of the governed was effectively turned on its head. Instead of Venezuelans paying taxes to the government in exchange for the protection of property and similar freedoms, the Venezuelan state would play a patrimonial role by bribing its citizens with all sorts of handouts to maintain its domain over them. On the other hand, countries based on a more liberal framework of governance have citizens paying taxes, and in return, these governments provide services that nominally protect the life, liberty, and property of the citizens. The state is not the owner, thus giving the citizens a strong check against the Leviathan should the government overstep its boundaries. And it goes on and on. Oil nationalization, a pig trough for politicians. Basically what the Venezuelan government did by nationalizing the oil companies was bypass the citizens and their taxes. Perez would take advantage of this state power grab to finance a profligate welfare state and a cornucopia of social welfare programs that resonated strongly with the populace. As a result, deficit spending became embraced by the political class, and increasing levels of foreign and public debt would become a norm in Venezuelan fiscal affairs. At this juncture, Venezuela's economy became overwhelmingly politicized. Oil boom periods were characterized by an inflow of petrodollars that the state used for the public works, the pharaonic public works, and social projects as a means to pacify the populace. In reality, no real wealth creation took place during these boom periods, as the state redistributed the rents according to political whims and usurped functions traditionally held by social society and private economic actors. When politicians and bureaucrats oversee businesses, decision-making is based on partisan and state interests rather than the efficiency and consumer preferences. Although the nationalization of the petroleum industry did not result in an immediate economic downturn, it laid the groundwork for the international decay that would clearly, institutional decay that would clearly manifest itself during the 80s and 90s, and that's when Hugo Chavez came to power. Now, that's the first part of this series. I'll put links to both of these up here also in the on the show notes page. This is very important to understand. This didn't happen overnight, folks. This started way back in the late 50s, early 60s, and has manifested itself in the state it is today. It takes a long time to hoodwink a populace. It takes a long time to buy the votes you need to put yourself and your cronies in power. It takes a long time to institute the crony capitalism that you need in order for you to take over a country and take over an economy. And again, it doesn't happen overnight. We're in the beginning stages of this. And maybe because of the way the United States was structured with our Constitution and the Declaration of Independence and protections of private property rights, we haven't gotten as far along as far as socialism in this country as Venezuela did in a shorter amount of time. But nonetheless, we are still heading down that road to serfdom, as Henry Hazlitt would say. Or Hayek wrote that, the road to serfdom. So we're heading down that road. We can look at other countries and see where they're at in that timeline of socialism/communism. And we can see how the roots of Marxism was implemented more slowly because of certain politicians, because they knew from the history lessons. They looked at Soviet Russia and seen how Marxism was taken over during the Bolshevik Revolution. and how many people died just during that revolution, and all the power struggles and all the deaths caused by Stalin during that bloody revolution, and the subsequent consolidation of power in Stalinist Russia. And as a politician, some of these politicians back then in Venezuela saw that and said, well, you know what? We can get there. We just need to do it a little bit slower. And that's what's happening in the United States. We don't teach our children proper economics. We don't teach our children proper history. It's all revisionist history. As a matter of fact, our economic history has also been revised too. So our children are not getting the actual truth. We still have politicians like Bernie Sanders, and he's a perfect example. He's an avowed social democrat. He laid out his agenda, and who likes these agendas more than the young people who don't have money to begin with? Oh, we're getting all this free stuff from the state. Oh, hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. You know, they're singing Bernie Sanders praises. You know, it's almost like they're singing, you know, Bernie Sanders, Hosanna, Hosanna in the highest. And the thing is because they were taught that way. They were taught that the state has your best interest at heart. It doesn't. It can't. It doesn't know you. Only you can have your own best interest at heart. I'm not saying we have to be selfish, folks, and this is where these ethical societies and these ethical humanists come in here. You know, that you folks, you individuals, you Christians and all these other adjectives they slap on there, you guys are just selfish. No, we're not selfish. If anybody is selfish, it's a socialist that's selfish. Because they don't want you to keep what you earn. They don't want you to own your property that you put blood, sweat, and tears in to acquire, to buy legally, and to pay for. They don't want that. They don't want you to control your lives. They're the ones being selfish. They're the ones that are covetous of your success. They're the ones envious of your success. But they've gotten a whole past couple generations below mine, and even a lot of folks in my generation, folks, have bought into this lie that the state's going to take care of you better than you can take care of yourself. Oh, the state will take care of all these societal ills, which they can't. I mean, my goodness, folks, if you just go back to the Great Society with Lyndon Baines Johnson, where they're going to have a war on poverty. As much money as we spent on folks that we consider to be in poverty, why do we still have the high poverty rates we have today? It's not the fault of capitalism. It's not the fault of free markets. It's not the fault of individualism. It's the lie that the government can take care of these problems better than you as an individual or as a local community or local society can take care of these problems within your own sphere of influence. It's this big government lie that continues to be propagated, put out there, and I'm telling you, that dog just doesn't hunt. That dog just doesn't hunt, but people don't realize that. People want to take the easy way out of life every time they can, and I understand that. I understand that we want to make our lives as easy as possible, but folks, you cannot build your life on the back, on the hard work of other people and expect to get it for nothing. And so social democracies, whatever Bernie Sanders is talking about, whatever taxes he wants to raise, and Hillary Clinton and all these Democrats that follow Bernie Sanders and his social democratic or democratic socialism, what he wants to say, you know, that's what he supports and all these other politicians want to support. The big lie here is he has to steal that money from folks who has it. But he doesn't couch it as that. He doesn't come out, well, we're going to steal the money from the 1% to pay for all these things. That's not how he couches his argument. How he couches his argument is through covetousness and envy. All these these bad 1%ers out here have all this money. It's unfair to you, so we need to take some of that from them and redistribute it so you can have all this free stuff so you can keep voting me into power. That's the truth of the matter. If they actually spoke truthfully, if they actually spoke truthfully, that's exactly what would happen. That's exactly what they would be saying, folks. I enjoyed this show, folks. I wish I didn't have the problems in starting this show up as I did earlier today, and I do apologize for that. And I'm still having some problems with my. I'm still having some problems with the audio on my coming off my big computer. So like I said, I'm gonna have to work on that and see what's going on there, and get this going for you. And again, I'm kind of discombobulated here because I'm working a different computer now than I normally have. This has been the Dan Clement Show. I'm your host, Dan Clement, your constitutional warrior. If you aim at nothing, you hit it every time. Have a great rest of the day, folks, and God bless. And we'll see you tomorrow at noon, Lord willing. The creek's don't rise, and I get my computers working all fantastically.